Okay, so you've started out with training, you understand how the body responds to an applied stress, you understand the fundamental principle of progressive overload, you've started to apply it in your training. Now you're not seeing the results that you want to see, and you want to see how you can manipulate variables in order to drive things forward a little bit faster. So what I want to focus on and explain to you is the three biggest overarching variables that we can manipulate in order to accelerate your rate of progress. Now, all of this, before I get started, is within the context of what you can recover from. If you are already doing the most you possibly can in all of these three areas and you try to do more, you might end up overtrained. So just to say that, everything we do in training has to be within the context of being able to recover from it over time, because then that means what we're doing is sustainable, and training has to be long-term. So back to my description, we've got three main variables. Number one is training frequency, number two is training volume, and number three is training intensity. So just going to go through these each one by one. Your training frequency would quite simply be how many days a week you train, or how often do you train, or how often do you train a certain muscle. Any one of these three. So if you're training 3 days a week and you want to increase that to 4, you will see better results. Very, very obvious. Now the second one, training volume, describes how much total workload you're doing in a session and or across the week. And that can be for your whole body or an individual muscle group, depending on the conversation. But it simply describes total amount of stress or total amount of workload that your body is having to handle. And the third variable, being training intensity, simply describes, or at least these days it's more popularly used to describe, training effort level in your sets and in your sessions. Now that would be relative to failure, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. So going through all of these three individually, training frequency, this can be split into two parts. Now, as I said, the number of days a week you train, that would be your training frequency, or at least one of the descriptions that I'll talk about. If you're training 3 days a week, doesn't matter how you split your days up across all muscle groups. If you're training 3 days a week and you train 4, all of a sudden, you'll see faster progress. Now, frequency can also mean how many days a week do you train a specific muscle group. So for example, if you were training your biceps once a week, even though you're in the gym 5 days a week, and you want bigger biceps, so you start training them twice a week, on average, that will see much better results. Now, that's not unlimited. It doesn't mean to say that if you train your biceps twice a day, every day, then you're going to see the very best results, because there's a limit, and as I said in the start of the video, we want to make sure that you are recovering between sessions as well. So that's training frequency. Generally, more is better, but again, within the context of being able to fairly comfortably recover from. Now, the second one is training volume. Now, training volume simply describes, as I said earlier, the total amount of workload or the total volume of stress applied to the body. Now, the best ways that we can describe this are either the number of exercises that we are performing for a specific muscle group or for a specific session or across the week, or the number of sets, which essentially is the same thing, but if some exercises we do less or more sets from, it could potentially be a better description. But regardless, it's the total amount of work that you're doing in a session or across the week. If you do 3 exercises twice a week for your glutes, and all of a sudden you're going to do 4 exercises twice a week for your glutes, that is an increase in volume, and usually would result in an increase in adaptation, but again, only in the context of what we can recover from. Now, the third and final variable that you can manipulate if you want to drive progress a little bit faster is training intensity. Now, intensity originally technically means or refers to the amount of weight that you put on the bar or an exercise when you're performing your exercise. Now, these days, it's just been coined as a term to describe effort level in the gym or effort level when you're performing your sets. And how we gauge effort level is just proximity to failure. And I'll have a whole video about this that you can go and check out if you want a bit more of a detailed scope on specifically what I mean by this. But say, for example, I'm going to do a bicep curl with great technique, and then I do it until the point where I'm fighting for the last rep, I barely get it up, put the weight down, and I know for a fact there's no way, even if there was a gun to my head, that I could perform one more rep. That's pretty much you maxing out your training intensity. But that being said, if you do your last rep and it flies up, you put the weight down, and you could have easily done 4 or 5 more, then really your training intensity has some wiggle room in order to increase. Now, if you wanted to manipulate that variable and you weren't anxious in the gym and you had the confidence to do so, it's a really, really powerful tool in order to drive progress. So Those are the three main variables that you can manipulate if you want to make better gains.